The taste of blood was metallic on my tongue, sharp, bitter, and final. I never thought I'd die in a wedding dress. Not like this, not again. The white satin clung to my skin, soaked in rainwater, dirt, and betrayal. My veil, once delicate and soft, was torn, fluttering in the wind like a mourning shroud. I could hear the soft thud of footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate, like someone walking away from a grave they had no intention of visiting again. I wanted to scream his name, Darian, but my throat was crushed by grief and strangled by disbelief. The man I loved, the man I gave my youth to, the man I trusted with my life, had been the one to end it. Not with a blade, not with poison, but with lies so cold they turned my heart to ice. "You should have just stayed quiet," he had whispered, moments before pushing me down those marble stairs. "You always dig too deep, Lyanna." Then darkness, then silence. But death wasn't the end. Not for me. Because as I took my last breath, something ancient, angry, powerful, answered the agony that bled from my soul. It reached into the void, into time, and twisted fate backward. When I opened my eyes again, I was standing in front of a mirror, and I was 26 again. 6 months before the wedding. 6 months before I became Lyanna Wexford, the woman who died loving the wrong man. This time, I wasn't going to beg for love. This time, I was going to burn everything he ever touched. There's something eerie about déjà vu when you know it's not just a feeling, it's memory, raw and real. The morning sun slipped through my bedroom blinds, warm and golden like nothing in the world had ever gone wrong. But I had died. I knew I had. And yet the date blinking on my phone screen was a cruel reminder. May 3rd, exactly 6 months before the wedding, before the betrayal, before I found Darian in our marital bed with her, before his brother, Casemir, told me everything, before I died. I stared at the blinking screen, heart thudding so hard it echoed in my ears. Was this a dream? A hallucination? Had my brain conjured this world to spare me from eternal torment? But everything was too real. The soft purr of my air conditioner, the way my old apartment smelled like cinnamon and lemon disinfectant, the chipped nail polish on my pinky toe that I hadn't had time to fix before the bridal photo shoot that day. God, it was all real. I scrambled out of bed and rushed to the mirror. The face that looked back at me was younger, smoother, brighter. There were no signs of the stress and emotional decay that would later wither me from the inside out. My eyes hadn't dulled yet. My lips still curled upward naturally when I smiled. I looked innocent. But I wasn't. Not anymore. This time, I knew everything. This time, I was going to play a different game. I stumbled back from the mirror, my breathing ragged. How could this be real? I slapped myself, once, then twice. My skin stung. I blinked. Still here. Still 26. Still staring into the eyes of a woman who would die by her husband's hand if she did nothing. A bitter laugh escaped me. I clutched the edge of the bathroom sink, the cold porcelain grounding me as memories, new and old, crashed together in my mind. I remembered this day. The ivory gown I was supposed to model for the bridal magazine shoot lay on my closet rack, still in its plastic covering. My phone would buzz soon. Lila, my best friend and maid of honor, would be calling, begging me not to be late. I'd laugh and promise to grab coffee for the whole team. Back then, I had no idea that Lila was sleeping with Darian, no clue that she was feeding him information about my insecurities, my vulnerabilities. I thought she was my sister in all but blood. I thought she was family. I thought wrong. I swallowed the bile crawling up my throat. I had 6 months to destroy every person who had plotted my downfall. 6 months to expose them, humiliate them, break them the way they had broken me. But I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't cry. No. I would smile. I would play their game. I would let them think I was the same naive little Lyanna, desperate for love and loyalty. And on the day I once said I do, I would stand at that same altar. But this time, it wouldn't be Darian waiting for me. It would be Casemir, his older brother. The one man Darian feared, the one man who had never betrayed me, not even when he had every reason to. But I couldn't skip steps. Revenge wasn't just about punishment, it was about precision. And the first step? Reclaiming control. The moment I stepped into my walk-in closet, I felt the ghost of my old self hovering behind me. She was wide-eyed and hopeful, staring at rows of pastel blouses, designer handbags, and satin shoes like they were trophies. Back then, I dressed for Darian's taste. He liked soft colors, flowy fabrics. "You're too intense when you wear black," he'd once said. Well, Darian, guess what? I reached for a black silk blouse with gold buttons and paired it with tailored high-waisted pants and crimson heels. My old self might have hesitated, but this version of me smiled at her reflection like a wolf licking its chops. My phone buzzed on cue. "Lila, babe, don't be late. Traffic's a mess downtown. Coffee order is the usual." "Right," I muttered. "The usual poison?" I tapped out a reply, my fingers calm even as my pulse thrummed with tension. "Me, on my way. Venti caffeine bombs for everyone. Can't let the bride-to-be faint on set." She'd read that and laugh. She'd think I was still playing the same role. But the real play had just begun. The photography studio smelled like hairspray, coffee, and ambition. Assistants buzzed around setting up lighting equipment, while racks of tulle and lace rustled in the breeze of an industrial fan. And there she was, Lila Morgan, tall, radiant, effortlessly charming. Her honey blonde waves bounced with every step, and her laugh rang like champagne flutes clinking at a gala. To the world, she was perfection. To me, she was a snake in a tiara. She spotted me and waved. "Lyanna? Babe, you look amazing." She jogged over and hugged me like she hadn't slept with my fiancé the night I'd gone to Paris for a bridal fitting. I had to look good, I said, squeezing her just a little too tight. "You know how these cameras catch everything. I know that's right." She stepped back, looping her arm through mine. "Today's all about you, babe. Just think, in 6 months, you'll be Mrs. Darian Wexford." I smiled, wide and gleaming. "Oh, I'm definitely thinking about that." A flicker of something, uncertainty, flashed in her eyes. "Good. Let it begin." "Lyanna, darling, turn your chin a little to the left. Yes, hold it. Perfect." The camera flashed. I held the pose, letting the veil cascade down my shoulders like a waterfall of regret. I could hear whispers behind me, Lila flirting with the stylist, the interns giggling, the makeup artist complaining about the lighting. Then, silence. A hush fell over the studio like a spell had been cast, and I knew why before I turned around. He was here. Casemir Wexford, Darian's older brother, the one man I had never fully understood. He didn't play games like the rest of them. He was powerful, calculating, and cold. But he had warned me. He had tried to tell me what Darian really was, and I hadn't listened. Casemir stood near the door, dressed in a steel gray suit, tall and straight-backed like a Roman statue. His hair was darker than Darian's, his eyes colder, his jaw tighter, and he was staring at me, not the dress, not the camera. Me. "Cass," I breathed. It slipped out before I could stop it. He blinked, just once, then he strode forward. "Lyanna," he said, his voice low and measured. "A word? Now?" Lila stepped up, confused. "We're in the middle of—" "I won't keep her long," Casemir cut in, eyes never leaving mine. I nodded, handing off my bouquet to a stylist and following him into a side hallway. The moment the door closed behind us, the air shifted. He leaned against the wall, folding his arms. "You're different. What makes you say that?" I asked. He tilted his head. "You're calm, controlled. The Lyanna I knew would be panicking about every eyelash being in place. And you're observant as always," I said. "Is that why you're here? To observe? I came to warn you." He was doing it again, trying to save me. Even now. But this time, I didn't need saving. I needed a partner. Casemir Wexford had the kind of presence that made silence feel loud. Even in a quiet hallway painted in soft pastels and lined with dusty lighting equipment, he commanded attention like he was standing in a courtroom. His gray eyes scanned me, sharp and analytical, like he was assessing a crime scene. The distance between us was no more than 4 feet, but the tension crackled like electricity. "You're calmer than usual," he said again, softer this time, with something unreadable in his tone. "Too calm." "I'm just learning to prioritize peace," I replied, lifting my chin. "Isn't that what everyone keeps preaching these days? Protect your energy. Embrace your soft era." His brows lifted slightly, like he didn't quite buy it, but he didn't call me out. "Is that what this is?" he asked. "Your soft era?" I smiled, tilting my head slightly. "Isn't that what all brides should be in? Glowing, dreamy, blissfully in love." Casemir's jaw ticked. There it was. The twitch of disdain he could never hide when he heard his brother's name in relation to me. "You know why I came today," he said after a beat. I didn't blink. "To ruin the shoot?" He snorted, the sound dry and humorless. "To stop you from making the worst decision of your life." I turned, slowly, resting my hand against the wall beside him. The worst decision of my life already happened, but I'm correcting it. He studied me. That was the thing about Casemir. He didn't talk to fill silence. He let it stretch until it revealed truths. And after a long pause he said, "You're playing a long game." I didn't answer. He took a step closer, now just inches away. I could feel the heat of him, the scent of sandalwood and bergamot lingering on his suit. "You were always smart," he said, "but now you're dangerous." "Shouldn't I be?" I whispered. "After what your brother did to me?" His eyes didn't flinch. "What he's done, or what he will do?" That stopped me cold. He was testing me. He couldn't know. Could he? I kept my face neutral, but my heart thudded like a war drum. Casemir's gaze sharpened. "You're different, Lyanna. It's like you've already seen the end of the movie and you're just re-watching the scenes." I gave a soft laugh. "Maybe I just finally grew up." He reached out, almost hesitating, and brushed a lock of hair from my shoulder. "Whatever this is," he said, "don't let him destroy you twice." There it was again. That flicker of protectiveness, that unspoken knowledge he had kept to himself, the warnings he'd given me in the past, warnings I had been too blind to believe. But not this time. This time, I would let him in, slowly, carefully. "I won't," I said, meeting his gaze. "But I might destroy him." For a fraction of a second his lips curved, not a smile, not really, more like approval. Then he stepped back. "Then we should talk, not here." I nodded once. "Tonight, I'll text you the location." Casemir gave me a curt nod, then walked off without another word. As the studio door clicked shut behind him, I exhaled, long and slow. The game had begun. Back in the studio, Lila was chatting with a young intern, her laughter bubbling like champagne. But when she saw me return, her smile faltered just for a second. I clocked it. She tried to hide it, turning the smile back on, too bright now, too polished. "Everything okay?" she asked, stepping toward me. That seemed intense. "Casemir's always intense," I said easily, smoothing a hand over my gown. "He's a Wexford." She laughed nervously. "True, he's always been, I don't know, mysterious? A little scary, even funny," I mused, watching her closely. "That's how people describe you when they don't know you well." She blinked. "Me?" I smiled wide, teeth gleaming. "I mean it as a compliment." She relaxed. "Well, I am a mystery." Yes, a mystery with a knife hidden behind her back. The day continued in a blur of camera flashes and false praise. I smiled on cue, posed when directed, and listened to the creative director praise the deep emotion in my eyes. If only they knew it wasn't acting. I chose the rooftop bar carefully. Neutral ground, quiet, private, high enough above the city that the noise became white static, like the world below didn't matter. Casemir arrived exactly on time, always the precise one. Unlike Darian, who thrived on chaos and delays, he wore another tailored suit, dark navy tonight, with his hair slightly tousled, as though he'd just come from a meeting or a confrontation. Probably both. "Why here?" he asked as he sat. "Because I wanted to feel tall," I replied, sipping from my wine glass. "Above everything." Looking down. He nodded once, fitting. For a moment we didn't speak, then he leaned forward. "Tell me what you know." I stared at him. Why should I? "Because," he said, "you didn't die in that hallway today. Something happened. Something big. And whatever it is, it's written all over you." I didn't flinch. Would you believe me if I said I had a vision of the future? Yes. The answer was so immediate it stole my breath. "You didn't even hesitate," I said quietly. "Because I've seen what Darian is capable of," he replied. "I've watched him destroy people for sport. I tried to warn you once. You didn't listen. I'm listening now, then talk." And so I did. Not everything, not the death, not the actual rebirth, but I gave him enough. I told him about Lila, about the lies, about the affair I had suspected, before I even had the proof, about the moments when Darian's mask had slipped just long enough for me to feel the rot underneath. Casemir didn't interrupt. He listened the way only someone who has been ignored his whole life learns to, intently, thoroughly, patiently, and when I was finished he said, "So what's the endgame?" I looked him straight in the eyes. "I want to make him watch what?" "Me marry you," I said softly. "At the same venue, same date, same everything." His expression didn't change, not at first. Then a slow, dangerous smile curved across his lips. "I assume you want my cooperation," he said. "Not just that," I replied. "I want your partnership, your protection, your name." He tapped his fingers against the table once, twice. "Then, you've always been beautiful, Lyanna, but this version of you, she's lethal." "Good," I said, draining my glass. "Because I'm not the bride anymore. I'm the storm." It was 6:17 a.m. when Darian Wexford stirred from sleep, one arm flung across the empty half of the bed where I used to lie. He didn't realize the silence had changed, didn't notice that I hadn't kissed his cheek before leaving, hadn't laid out his favorite tie like I used to, hadn't sent the good morning text that I always sent before a shoot. To him, I was still the same, still docile, still head over heels in love, still his. He had no idea he was already losing. The penthouse gleamed with a curated kind of elegance, too perfect to be lived in, white marble floors, chrome fixtures, a wall of glass that framed the city skyline like a painting. The whole place smelled faintly of bergamot and leather, thanks to the automated diffuser system Lyanna had installed when they moved in 2 years ago. He never thanked her for it. Just like he never thanked her for stocking his favorite scotch, or warming his towel before he stepped out of the shower, or memorizing his calendar down to the minute. Darian Wexford didn't believe in gratitude, he believed in ownership. And Lyanna? She had been his finest acquisition, or so he thought. He stood in front of the mirror in his ensuite bathroom, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored white shirt, the silk stretching slightly over his broad chest. He examined himself with the kind of self-approval that bordered on worship. Strong jaw, perfect teeth, hair immaculately styled. He was everything women wanted and men envied. And that, he thought smugly, would always be true, especially once Lyanna became his wife. "Status," he said aloud. A soft chime sounded from his phone as the house AI read out his schedule. 7:30 a.m., call with Montreal investors. 8:45, breakfast meeting with internal legal. 10, grooming appointment. 11, drive to photo shoot to surprise fiancé. He smirked. "Cancel that," he interrupted. "Cancelled," the AI confirmed. He didn't need to surprise her. She'd be thrilled enough to see him later tonight. She always was. She was obsessed with the idea of love, his love, and that made her easy to control. At least it used to. Lila arrived without knocking. She never did. She wore a pink wrap dress that clung to her like second skin. A pair of red-bottomed heels that clicked through the entryway like a metronome of seduction. She carried a pastry bag in one hand and a smug smile on her face. "Guess who brought croissants from Marcel's?" she said, sing-song. Darian didn't even look up from his laptop. "If they're not the almond ones, you can turn right back around." "Oh, sweetheart." She pouted. "I brought your favorite, and the espresso ones." That got his attention. He pushed back from his desk and gave her a once-over. "Have I told you how dangerously good you look in that dress?" "Only twice this week," she said, laughing. He reached out, grabbing her by the waist and pulling her into his lap. "Then I'm overdue." Lila grinned. "You spoil me." He didn't answer. His hand slid up her thigh under the hem of her dress. For a moment it felt like everything was the same, like the game they'd played for 2 years hadn't changed. But then... Lila froze. Darian noticed it instantly. What? She knows. His hand stilled. Lila leaned in close, whispering in his ear. "I don't know how, but I swear, Darian, Lyanna's different. Something's off." He pulled back, studying her face. "She said something today," Lila continued. "At the shoot, the way she looked at me, it was like she saw straight through my skin." "Maybe she's just stressed," Darian said, though a tightness coiled in his chest. "No." Lila shook her head. "This wasn't nerves, this was... cold. Like she was playing with me." Darian stood abruptly, letting her slide off his lap. "Don't be paranoid," he muttered, pacing now. "She's not stupid, Darian," Lila snapped. "You think she won't notice the hotel receipts eventually? Or the extra keycard to your lake house? She hasn't noticed for years." "Well," Lila said slowly, She has now. Meanwhile, I watched the storm clouds gather from the terrace of Casemir's private club, sipping ginger tea from a china cup lined with gold. My dress was tailored black crepe, cinched at the waist with a satin belt. It was a quiet outfit, but in my posture, my gaze, my silence, I held the kind of presence that made people turn their heads. The club's maitre d' approached quietly. "Miss Renee, your guest has arrived." I nodded. "Send her up." Lila entered 2 minutes later, feigning breathlessness and surprise at the upscale venue. "Lyanna, I didn't know you were a member here." "I wasn't," I replied smoothly. "Casemir is..." Her face flickered at the name. "Everything okay?" I asked, voice full of innocent concern. "Of course." She sat across from me, smoothing her dress. "Just surprised. You and Cas have always been... what's the word? Distant?" I tilted my head. "People grow closer, especially when they share interests. Like? Justice," I said. "And loyalty." Lila blinked. "That's poetic." I offered a small, sad smile. "Isn't it?" I let the silence stretch, let her squirm under the weight of it. I could see the wheels turning in her head, wondering if I knew, if I suspected, if I was simply playing a new role. Good. Let her doubt herself. Let her panic. Back at home, I stood before the same vanity where I once cried over Darian's late-night absences. Now, I slipped the engagement ring from my finger, letting the diamond catch the light. It sparkled so beautifully, so deceptively. I placed it in a velvet box, not to discard it, but to keep it. Like a relic from a life I had buried. One day, when Darian begged me to stay, when he got down on his knees in that same venue where he'd once kissed me with promises of forever, I'd return this ring, not with grief, but with mockery. The scent of lavender and ash filled the air. It was subtle, barely there, but I'd chosen it deliberately. Lavender to remind me of what I once was. Ash for what I'd become. The oil diffuser whirred softly as I walked through my penthouse, barefoot, the hem of my silk robe whispering over the hardwood floors. Each step felt rehearsed, like I was gliding across a stage where I was both the lead actress and the hidden director. This was no longer my home. Not really. It was a theater, a trap, a perfectly decorated cage where I would tame the beast who once ruined me. I had a habit Darian didn't know about. After he fell asleep, I used to sit in the small walk-in closet meant for off-season storage. Tucked between boxes of old coats and forgotten designer bags was a trunk no one had touched in years. Inside, I kept the ghosts, love letters, photo booth pictures, old anniversary cards in his neat, detached handwriting. But tonight, I wasn't here to cry over them. I was here to destroy them. One by one, I pulled out the relics of our fabricated love, held them to the scented candle I'd brought in, and watched as fire ate the edges. The first letter, he'd written it after our second month together. Promises of a future, confessions of missing me every second we were apart. Burned. The Valentine's card, with his signature, "I'm not good with words, but I'm good at loving you." I had believed him. God, I had clung to that line. Gone. I didn't weep. I didn't hesitate. By the time I reached the bottom of the trunk, the room smelled like scorched roses and finality. But at the very bottom, something unexpected caught my eye. A photograph I didn't remember keeping. Casemir. He was younger, standing beside me during one of Darian's charity galas, holding a champagne flute and looking away from the camera. I was mid-laugh. He wasn't smiling, but the way his eyes were angled toward me, the way his fingers hovered close to mine, almost brushing my hand. It was a moment, unspoken, undeclared, but real. I sat back, breath catching. Had I been so blind? 11:45 p.m., a message delivered to Casemir, "Can't sleep. Too much fire in my blood. Meet me at the solarium. Bring whiskey." The reply came within minutes. "Casemir, on my way. Don't burn down the world without me." The solarium had once been my sanctuary. I used to grow orchids here. Now the glass walls reflected the city lights and the shadows of the two people who were quietly becoming conspirators. Casemir arrived in dark jeans and a gray coat, casual in a way I had never seen him before. He held a bottle of 18-year-old Glenfiddich and 2 glasses. "I assume this isn't about insomnia," he said, handing me a glass. "It's about clarity," I murmured. We sat across from each other, the whiskey between us, the air thick with tension and the scent of orange blossoms from the single plant I'd refused to let die. I burned his letters tonight, I said. Everything. All of it. His gaze flickered to mine. Good. But I found something, I added slowly. A photo. Of you. Of us. He didn't speak. You looked at me like I was the only real thing in the room. A beat of silence. Then, his voice. Low, you were. I blinked. You always were, he said. But I had to stay away. Because if I didn't, I would have stolen you from him. Why didn't you? Casemir stared at me hard. Because back then, you loved him, and you would have hated me for it. I swallowed. And then, so softly I almost didn't hear myself, I don't love him anymore. He didn't smile, didn't move, but he said, good. We sat like that for a while, not speaking, letting silence hold space for something that hadn't been acknowledged in years. And then I leaned in, whispering, I want to start planning the wedding. Casemir's brow lifted. You mean our wedding? I nodded. At the old venue, same color scheme, same officiant, down to the damn petals on the aisle. And the date? He asked, voice unreadable. Exactly 1 year from the day he proposed. Casemir tipped back his glass. Poetic. I finished mine too, fire curling in my stomach. No, I said. Not poetic. Vengeful. Across the city, Darian sat at a bar he rarely frequented anymore. He had told Lila he needed space. In truth, he needed silence. And control. Something was wrong. Lyanna had been too calm lately, too quiet. She hadn't picked a fight in weeks, hadn't interrogated him about the extra meetings, the late nights, the vague receipts. She'd even stopped asking about the wedding. That was what scared him. Because when Lyanna stopped reacting, that meant she'd stopped loving. And a woman who stops loving can become anything. He ordered a second drink, ignoring the waitress's flirty smile. His thoughts were spinning. What if she knew? What if she had evidence? Worse, what if she was plotting something? A sick feeling twisted in his gut. For the first time in years, he felt genuinely afraid. But of what? Of losing her, or of being outplayed? Back in the solarium, Casemir was standing now, watching the lights flicker over the skyline. I approached him slowly, standing beside him. Why now? He asked without looking at me. Why me? Because you're the only one he's ever truly feared, I said, and you're the only one who ever saw me. Finally, he turned. His hand reached up slowly, brushing a strand of hair from my cheek. Then let's make him watch, Casemir whispered. Let's make him regret ever thinking he could replace you. My breath caught, and in that moment, as I stood on the cusp of vengeance wrapped in silk and silence, I didn't feel like a woman rebounding from betrayal. I felt like a queen resurrected from ashes. The tea set was the same one Darian's mother had gifted me after our engagement, a vintage Royal Albert collection in bone white and dusty rose, gilded in 24-karat gold trim. At the time, I thought it meant acceptance. Now I understood it was just tradition, an obligation passed on to the next obedient bride-to-be. How poetic that I used the same set to serve my enemies. Casemir sipped calmly across from me, one ankle resting over the other knee, dressed like sin in a black turtleneck and tailored slacks. I had just served him jasmine tea, my own private nod to the subtle strength of my revenge. We sat in what used to be Darian's favorite lounge room, the very same one where he and I once hosted his investors, all smug charm and practiced affection. Now it had been rearranged, slightly, enough to make the space feel unfamiliar, unsettling. Enough to feel like something was off. Much like me. You've changed everything, Casemir noted, glancing around. Just enough, I replied, folding my legs as I sipped my tea. Enough to disorient him without him realizing why he's uncomfortable. You always were surgical. No, I learned to be. I looked down at my cup. Pain is a sharp tutor. Casemir's jaw flexed. Lyanna, you don't owe me an explanation. I'm not giving one. I met his gaze. I'm setting the stage. He leaned back. So, what's today's performance? I smiled, slow and deliberate. Today, I said, I invite Lila over. Casemir's brow rose. And I make her think she's won. Lila arrived precisely on time. Of course she did. She was the kind of woman who mistook punctuality for moral superiority. She wore a cream halter dress, expensive, understated, and carried an Hermes clutch that I recognized from Darian's last business trip to Paris. I met her at the door with a practiced smile. Lila, darling, I said, as if I hadn't spent the night before scripting 5 different ways to psychologically dismantle her. "Come in?" She blinked, a little thrown by my warmth. "Lyanna, this place looks incredible. Thank you." "I redecorated," I said lightly. "Felt like something new. You've always had such elegant taste." Her voice held sugar and static. "Oh, it's evolved," I said, leading her inside. "I've learned that elegance isn't about restraint. It's about power. Subtle, quiet, deliberate power." She faltered for half a second. "Good." We sat in the lounge, porcelain cups between us, a tray of lemon poppy seed scones on the table. I had baked them myself, just like I used to when she and Darian came over and pretended they weren't sleeping together behind my back. "You look radiant," Lila offered. "I feel reborn," I replied, tone steady. "New intentions, new energy, new clarity." She laughed a little too hard. "Well, I hope you're not getting cold feet about the wedding." I tilted my head. Oh, quite the opposite. I picked up a wedding binder from the side table, one that Casemir and I had begun filling with our own secret plans. I flipped it open to a page of floral arrangements. The header read ceremony, revised. I turned it so she could see. "I'm redoing the entire event," I said. "Every single element, from scratch." Lila blinked. "What about Darian's preferences?" "Oh, he'll adapt," I said smoothly. "This is going to be my wedding, my way." A long pause. Lila reached for her tea and took a cautious sip. "And when were you planning on telling him?" she asked, a careful edge in her tone. I smiled brightly. "Soon. But I wanted you to be the first to see it." Her cup paused at her lips. Checkmate. As soon as Lila left, her composure frayed, her smile cracked. I closed the binder and let my expression drop. Casemir stepped in from the adjoining room, where he'd been silently observing from behind the mirror wall I had installed 2 weeks ago. "You are terrifying," he said, tone almost reverent. "She thinks she's in control," I said. "She thinks she's still winning. She's not stupid. No, she's dangerous." I turned to him. "Which is why we let her think she's safe." He approached slowly, one hand in his pocket. "And Darian?" I walked to the window, watching the city below. "He's going to feel it soon," I said. "That crawling sensation under his skin, the creeping cold that tells him something's wrong but he can't prove it." "Paranoia," Casemir said softly. "Paranoia," I confirmed. "The seed has been planted." Meanwhile, at Wexford Holdings, Darian stared at his phone, rereading the text Lyanna had sent hours earlier. "Had tea with Lila. She seemed tired. You should check on her. Simple, direct, casual, and laced with implication." He leaned back in his chair, heart pounding. Why would she mention Lila? Why now? Unless she knew something. Unless she was taunting him. His assistant knocked twice before poking her head in. "Sir, the London rep is here. Tell him to wait." "But he's flown 12 hours. I said wait," Darian snapped. She vanished. Darian stood and walked to his office bar, pouring himself a double neat. His hands shook slightly. He couldn't remember the last time that had happened. He used to feel invincible. Now all he felt was watched. I returned to the solarium, this time alone. The orange blossom tree had started to bloom again, new buds, delicate and defiant. I sat by the glass, notebook open on my lap. To-do list, infirm venue reservation under alias. Initiate begin public-facing bridal stress narrative. Initiate phase schedule accidental run-in with Lila and Casemir. Initiate phase 2 of Darian unraveling emotional dissonance phase. Acquire flash drive from Casemir evidence folder. I tapped my pen against the last item. He hadn't shown me yet, said it was too early, but I knew there was something. Emails, messages, financial records, something that would be the final nail in Darian's coffin. And when I had it, I would call a press conference, invite everyone who had ever thought Darian Wexford was the perfect man, and watch him burn under the same spotlight he used to adore. Casemir joined me again later that night, wordless as he took the seat beside mine. We didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, quietly, "You're not alone in this." I looked at him. He was staring forward, but I could see it, the remorse, the guilt, the rage hidden behind layers of restraint. "Sometimes," I said, "I still want to forgive him. Just for a second, just so I can understand why." Casemir finally looked at me. "Understanding him won't heal you." "No," I said. "But making him understand me might. There's a moment between waking and sleep when the world is still fragile, where the mind hasn't yet decided what's real, and the heart hasn't remembered what to hurt for. It was in that exact moment, lying in the silk sheets of a bed we used to share, that I whispered to the silence, "Today, we begin." Not just a step, not just a push, but the first public blow, the first stain on Darian's white-suited image, the kind of move that would ripple across boardrooms and tabloids, the kind of strike no PR scrub could erase. The mirror didn't lie as I stared into it that morning, but Darian always had. Choosing my outfit was no longer a matter of style, it was strategy. I went with an ivory two-piece power suit, custom-tailored, double-breasted, with a plunge deep enough to dare attention but clean enough to command respect. A single diamond choker at my throat, hair swept up in a structured bun, lashes soft, lips nude, elegant, ice-cold, surgical. Casemir waited downstairs in a charcoal-gray Aston Martin, sunglasses low on his nose, radiating the quiet power of a man who was both predator and ally. He didn't speak as I slid into the passenger seat. He didn't need to. We were on the same page. We always were now. Wexford Holdings had organized a press event for their upcoming partnership with the international luxury brand, Valente. It was supposed to be a celebration of prestige, a blend of European elegance and American ambition. Darian had rehearsed the speech for weeks. The press release was ready. Influencers had been flown in. Champagne chilled. But what he didn't know, what no one but Casemir and I knew, was that Valente's CEO had a wife, and she happened to be one of my old classmates, one who also had a folder of screenshots, receipts, Darian's emails to Lila, romantic, explicit, arrogant, his transaction logs, gifts, trips, hush money, his voice messages, confessions, slips. She'd handed them over the second I asked, and this morning I sent them to Valente's board. The event started normally enough. Guests mingled, cameras clicked. The Valente banners flanked the walls of the event hall like regal tapestries. Darian took the stage in a navy suit, flashing his signature smirk. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "when we speak of legacy..." He was cut off. A ripple of motion at the back of the hall. Phones lighting up. A muffled conversation. A frown from one of the Valente reps. Then a murmur. Then silence. One of the executives leaned in, whispered something in the CEO's ear. The CEO's face turned to stone, and before Darian could finish his second sentence, the CEO stood and took the microphone. "We apologize for the inconvenience," he said smoothly, "but Valente will be reevaluating all international partnerships effective immediately." A pause. Darian stared, stunned. "That wasn't... What's going on?" The CEO didn't answer. He simply looked at him, disgust faint but present, and walked away. The crowd dispersed slowly, confused and buzzing. Paparazzi lingered. And then the first whispers began to hit social media. Hashtag Wexford Scandal. Hashtag Cheater CEO. Hashtag Darian Downfall. I stood in the shadows of the adjacent corridor, Casemir by my side, watching as Darian's world flickered, cracked, and trembled. He was pacing now, speaking in clipped tones on the phone, hand raking through his hair. "She did this," he hissed into the phone. "It's her. I know it." He didn't say my name, but he knew. Casemir's voice was low. "He's starting to spiral. Good." I folded my arms. "Let him." He turned to me. "You sure you want to push this fast?" I met his gaze. He humiliated me in silence for years, behind closed doors, in my own home, while I smiled through interviews and through charity balls and played perfect wife. He lit my heart on fire and watched me burn from a throne of lies. I stepped forward, closer to the edge of the hallway, close enough that I could almost feel the weight of Darian's panic in the air. Let him feel the flames now. Darian's PR team scrambled like rats. They issued a clarifying statement, called the Valente decision unexpected, tried to spin the narrative, but the screenshots were out. Lila's voice in one of the recordings, "What if your wife finds out?" Darian's reply, "She won't. She's too busy planning a wedding that'll never happen." It played on TikTok like a dramatic soap opera. Millions of views, thousands of stitches. Comment sections flooded with venom. "She deserves better." What a walking red flag. Not the wedding that'll never happen line. "Sis, you better marry his brother." "Oh, I plan to." I returned home to find a package on my doorstep. No label, no card. Inside, a velvet box. And inside that, a key. A single gold-plated key engraved with a date, my wedding date. No note, but I knew who it was from. Casemir. I clutched it tightly in my hand, a shiver running through me. It wasn't just a token, it was a promise, a pact, a warning, and maybe a future. Elsewhere, Lila was scrambling. Her phone had been ringing non-stop, her social media flooded with hate. Someone had leaked her messages too, her cruel comments about me, her entitlement, her jealousy. She slammed her phone down on the marble counter of the hotel suite Darian had stashed her in. "Why didn't you delete them?" she screamed into the phone. "You think I remember every damn message I've ever sent?" Darian barked. "This is a nightmare. It's her. She's doing this." Lila paused. "You really think she knows everything?" There was a long silence on the other end. "I think," Darian said slowly, "she knows more than we ever thought possible." I stood in front of the mirror again that night, dressed down now, hair loose, skin bare, no diamonds, no makeup, just me. And I whispered, "One down." The mirror didn't lie, but it didn't forgive either, and neither did I. The storm didn't knock. It walked in wearing a Rolex and cologne I used to love. He stood in my doorway at exactly 7:46 p.m., just as the city lights began to glitter like a million unspoken secrets. The hallway behind him was dim, the gold sconces casting shadows on the walls like claws. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just opened the door wider and said, "I was wondering when you'd come." Darian Wexford. My husband, technically still mine. Hair a little out of place, tie askew, eyes bloodshot and full of questions. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't look like a god. He looked mortal. He looked afraid. "Can I come in?" he asked. I tilted my head, leaning against the frame. "You never asked before. This isn't before." True. Before, he used to walk into my space, my heart, my trust, like it was owed to him, like his name alone unlocked everything. Now? Now I wanted to make him wait, make him doubt. But I let him in. Because I wanted him close. Because prey always looked better from arm's reach. He walked through the penthouse like it was unfamiliar, like he could sense something dangerous in the air, like maybe, deep down, he finally understood. I didn't offer him a drink. He sat anyway. "You leaked it," he said, skipping all pretense. "I leak nothing," I replied, sitting across from him. "I reveal." His jaw clenched. "You cost me Valente. Do you know what that deal meant?" "Of course," I said softly. "It meant more money to hide your filth under. It meant another stage for your mask." His fist tightened. "You're blowing this out of proportion." I laughed. It wasn't sweet. It was sharp, bitter, heavy with years of silenced screams. "Out of proportion? You cheated on me with your assistant, your ex, a woman you introduced as your cousin, and Lila, my maid of honor." He stood. "It wasn't supposed to mean anything. Then why did it cost everything?" He paced now, like a lion, like a man with no more leashes. "I tried to fix it," he said. "I tried to keep you happy. You tried to keep me distracted. I stood too. You bought me diamonds when I cried. You planned vacations when I asked questions. You fucked other women and came home with roses like I was supposed to thank you." He turned then, eyes wide. "Why are you doing this? Why now?" I smiled. It was slow, surgical. I died once, Darian, when I found those messages. When I realized I'd been sleeping next to a stranger for 5 years. When I saw the two of you, here, in our bed. He froze. "You know about that?" he whispered. I stepped closer, voice low. "I know everything. I know she wore my perfume. I know she moaned my name once by accident. I know you laughed about it." His face went pale, and finally he sat back down, because that's what ghosts do when they realize the house belongs to someone else now. "I didn't think you'd find out," he said, voice hoarse. "You didn't think I'd fight back," I corrected. He looked up. "So this whole thing with Casemir, the wedding, is it just revenge?" I tilted my head. "Why? Would that make it easier to swallow?" "No, it makes it worse." "Good. Because truthfully, it wasn't just revenge. It was rebirth. It was me reclaiming every piece of myself he tried to diminish. And yes, it was poetic that the very brother he compared himself to, belittled, dismissed, was the one I would stand beside next. "You don't get to feel sorry now," I said. "You chose this. You opened the door to rot. I just let the world see inside." He looked at me, really looked. Not like a husband, not like a lover, but like a man facing the reckoning of his own reflection. "You loved me," he said, "not a question, a fact. I did, I said, fiercely, stupidly, entirely. And now? Now, I said, walking toward the door and opening it again. I love myself. He stared for a beat, then two, then walked out, and for the first time in years the air behind him didn't cling to me. I found Casemir on the rooftop garden, leaning against the railing, city lights casting gold across his cheekbones. You saw him? He asked without turning. He's afraid. Good. But not finished, I said. Not yet. Casemir turned to me then. His eyes weren't soft, but they were honest. Do you still feel something for him? I thought about it, about the weight, the history, the betrayal. Then I said, I feel the satisfaction of watching him become the man he made me feel like. Casemir nodded. He reached out then, fingers brushing mine. Not possessive, not pushy, just present. I want to be by your side when you finish this, he said. I smiled. You will be. In my journal that night, I wrote, Phase 1, public shame. Phase 2, confrontation. Phase 3, the twist no one sees coming. And then I wrote one more sentence beneath it, just for me. He thought betrayal was the climax. He never expected the sequel. There's a kind of quiet that doesn't soothe. The kind that isn't peace. It's the silence after a scream, the breath before a verdict. That was the silence that lingered in the days after my confrontation with Darian, like the city itself was holding its breath, waiting for the final blow. And in that stillness, I began to stitch together the final steps. Not out of hatred, not even out of vengeance, but because some endings need to be witnessed, especially by the people who thought they'd never be held accountable. 10 days until the wedding, the invitations were already out, embossed, cream and gold, sealed with a red wax insignia, Casemir and Lyanna, the reclamation vow. People thought it was bold, brazen. Some called it toxic, some called it legendary, but no one could ignore it. We'd chosen to hold the ceremony at the same location where Darian and I had married 5 years ago, the old Wexford estate chapel, now closed to the public, surrounded by black stone fountains and iron rose hedges. Casemir said, You don't have to go through with it there. But I did, because I wanted the ghosts to watch me walk down that aisle again. Only this time, I'd be walking towards someone who saw me, not someone who used me. 7 days until the wedding, I'd avoided media requests for weeks, declined talk shows, ignored calls. But I chose one interview to say my piece, a one-on-one sit-down with journalist Maren Ayodeji, known for her no-fluff, no-filter style. The room was neutral, white chairs, soft lights. I wore an ivory pantsuit again, my armor. Maren began, Why now? I was tired of being quiet, I said, tired of being polite about betrayal. And the wedding? You're marrying his brother. Yes. Some call it spiteful. I call it a sequel. Maren blinked. To what? To the story I never got to finish. The one where I lose myself for a man who couldn't even love me honestly. This time, I get to be the writer. 5 days until the wedding, he came to the dress rehearsal. Uninvited, unwanted, unchanged. The staff tried to block him at the gate, but I allowed him in, let him walk down the same stone path where he once waited for me in a tuxedo he didn't deserve. He stood at the edge of the altar, eyes dark. Casemir was inside, reviewing the music cues. You're really doing it? Darian asked. Yes. With him? I tilted my head. He never lied to me, he was always jealous of me. No, I said, he pitied you, there's a difference. Darian stepped closer. I still love you. I smiled then, a soft, tragic smile. You never loved me. You loved how I loved you. He tried to speak. I stepped back. You don't get to haunt me anymore. 3 days until the wedding, I found the letter beneath my pillow. No envelope, no signature. Just 6 words written in Casemir's sharp, clean handwriting. If you need an escape, say so. I stared at it for a long time. Because even now, with everything we'd done, every plan and every vow, he still gave me a choice. That was the difference. Darian had always expected me to stay. Casemir would let me go if I asked. But I didn't want to leave, because this wedding wasn't a trap, it was freedom. The sky was pale lavender, the kind of color that made everything look surreal. Like a dream you weren't sure you'd woken from yet. I dressed slowly, not in white, but in deep crimson, rich, royal, reborn. A fitted gown with a sheer cape that flowed behind me like smoke. My mother's necklace. No veil. No hiding. Casemir waited at the altar in a midnight black suit, no tie, shirt slightly open, effortless, steady. And in the front row? Darian. Unshaven. Watching like a man seeing his own funeral. He hadn't tried to stop it. He didn't need to. Because this wedding wasn't about him. Casemir held my hands, and when he spoke, his voice was rough with truth. "I don't promise to heal everything you've been through," he said. "But I promise to never be the reason you break again. I swear to protect your fire without trying to contain it." My breath caught. Then I spoke. "I don't promise to forget who I used to be. But I promise that every version of me will be safe with you. I vow to love you without apology, to fight beside you, not against you." We sealed it with a kiss under an arch of roses and blood-colored lilies. The crowd stood, some crying, some stunned. But Darian? He was still, frozen, watching the life he'd taken for granted become something better without him. We danced under a chandelier of glass tears. And then I took the mic. "Thank you for being here," I said. "To witness not just a wedding, but a resurrection." I looked right at Darian. "You can destroy a house, but sometimes the woman who lived in it builds a palace from the ashes." I handed the mic back, and as the music rose, I turned away. Because I was done performing pain. Later, on the balcony of the suite, Casemir wrapped his arms around me from behind. "Still want to escape?" he asked. I turned, kissed his jaw, and whispered, "No, I'm already free." Some people think stories end when the curtain falls. But the truth is, the real stories begin after the lights go out, when no one's watching, when the applause fades and the silence returns. That's where you find the truth. That's where you find yourself. 3 months later, the headlines the news hit on a slow Monday morning. Wexford Corporation in crisis. CEO Darian Wexford faces SEC investigation for fraudulent dealings and breach of contract. And just like that, the man who once smiled like he owned the world was everywhere for losing it. I didn't gloat. I didn't dance in the flames. Because I didn't have to. Justice has a strange way of arriving late, but dressed in truth. Casemir showed me the paperwork weeks ago. He'd been investigating quietly for years, unsure how deep Darian's web ran. He never planned to expose it, until Darian threatened me at the rehearsal. That was all Casemir needed to burn the empire down. Not for vengeance, but for protection. For me. Lila tried to claw her way into pity. After the wedding, she leaked a fake suicide attempt to the tabloids. Then, a week later, she went on a talk show and cried about being used by Darian, called herself a victim of his manipulation, said she never meant to fall in love with a married man. But screenshots are forever, and so is karma. The internet devoured her facade in a single afternoon. The last I heard, she was working as a stylist's assistant in Monaco, far from cameras, far from glory, still waiting for a redemption arc that would never come. My life now is quieter, but only in the way thunder quiets after a storm. I launched my own brand, Ember, a luxury fashion and empowerment line for women who've been silenced, cheated, or underestimated. Our tagline? From ashes, we rise. The first campaign featured women from all walks of life. Divorcees, single moms, cancer survivors, abuse survivors. No retouching, no filters, just raw, radiant fire. We sold out in 3 days. I still keep one thing from the past locked in a drawer, a letter I wrote to Darian but never mailed. It reads, "Darian, I don't hate you anymore. Hating you was still giving you space in my story. I've reclaimed every inch of me you ever touched, twisted, or took for granted. You were a chapter, a painful one. But I closed that book, and now I write myself in ink too permanent for anyone like you to erase." Lyanna. 1 year later, we didn't do another wedding. We didn't need another ceremony. Casemir and I celebrated our anniversary in a small cafe in Florence. No photographers, no guests, just laughter. He gave me a single ring, not gold but obsidian, a stone forged in fire, dark and beautiful and unbreakable. "This is who we are," he said, "not perfect, not untouched, but whole." I kissed him under the stars, and for the first time in my life, I believed in forever. Not because someone promised it, but because I built it. Final journal entry, April 19th, exactly 2 years since the betrayal. I used to think love was sacrifice. Now I know love is returning to yourself without guilt. I loved. I lost. I was reborn. And this time, I didn't come back just to survive. I came back to reign. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you loved it and you would love for a part 2, kindly comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more amazing content. Drop a comment with your favorite moment, and I'll see you in the next one.